Hello, and welcome to my general fantasio review. In this review, I will be avoiding direct spoilers and lightly touching on what I view are the strong and weak points of this game. The long story short, I'm just going to be talking up this game. I'm the game's intended audience. It is what it is. But I digress. Let's get the most important bit out of the way, the conclusion. I recommend this game even to people who might not be big fans of JRPGs because it is high enough quality as a game to be worth stepping into unfamiliar ground. If you like JRPGs to begin with, you should look into this game. If you don't like JRPGs, you might want to try it, but I'll put an emphasis on might. It really depends on the why you dislike JRPGs aspect. Regardless, I'll be going over some of the basics regarding this game, so if that can help with any such I dislike JRPGs sentiments because of A, B, or C, maybe that could help out. If not, it is what it is. I would also like to add a caveat that Atlas is very prone to frequent and relevant sales to their properties. Just off of some quick research, Persona 5 Royal released about 2 years ago. It's been down to 60% off. Persona 3 Reload came out, I believe, January this year, and it was 50% off recently. And Shin Megami Tensei 5, I don't remember what the remix word was, came out, I want to say April or May, and it's already been 50, no, I think it was 40% off as of the recent sale. But going off of that, it would not be surprising at all for Metaphor to be on significant sale as early as the mid-year sale for Steam. So if you are interested in it, but you have a backlog large enough that you can wait, and you're not in immediate need to play it, I would recommend waiting as long as a year and get some decent savings that way. But there is a bigger caveat, and that is actually touched on. Atlas likes to do remasters of their games. It's become sort of a meme that Atlas will release a game, and then they will finish the game a few years later. In that, I mean that Atlas tends to do a definitive version of a game that they released a few years back, and usually that definitive version is just outright better in every way, and it has a similar caveat of sales. But it's the caveat here is, or the caveat to the caveat is that one, it hasn't been announced yet. Two, there's no guarantee it will happen. It's just pattern recognition at work. And three, you'll be seeing this sort of thing in 3 to 5 years. And if you go with the previous thing, that too will probably be on the sale within a year. So you're waiting like 3-4 years to play it. If that is in your ballpark, that's fine. I played it. It's a good game. It's a good game right now. But I think these are things that are worth knowing if you're going to buy the game or you're interested in the game. If you only plan to play it once, ever, you might want to just wait for the definitive version that may or may not happen. If you and if there is no word of the definitive version, you can still wait a year and get it on sale, or you can buy it now. It's not going to break the bank in all likelihood. It's still a 60-80 hour RPG, I would say, for one playthrough. Probably closer to 80 to 100 hours if you are doing New Game Plus. For the small bit of extra content you get for it, you get an extra difficulty mode. There's an extra boss fight. There's some stuff. It's not a huge New Game Plus mode, though, which is a spoiler, but I think it's relevant. And one last thing before I start start talking about the game at large. Just going to throw the ethical appeal out of the way. I bought this game with my own money. I'm not a big enough YouTuber to have an advertiser copy or anything of the like. This was a game that I already had a favorable impression of. I was aware of it more than a year in advance. It's of a genre that I am fond of from a developer that I respect to a certain degree, mostly in the sense that I have liked their games historically. so I'm inclined to suspect that I will like future games as well. And I would say that I like this game above average as far as their games are concerned. With that out of the way, I've talked a whole lot about I like this game, but I think it's more important to talk about why I like this game. So let's start with the gameplay. I've said a few times that I like JRPGs, and if you've seen other reviews on, not my reviews because I haven't put too many out yet, but if you've seen other reviews on Fantasio, you probably have heard of, this game is similar to the recent Persona games. I'd go further and say that this game has taken aspects of various Atlas IPs in general, to the extent where it is almost a Frankenstein's monster if you recognize the bits and pieces. But despite that, it is most certainly distinct as its own game and franchise. But let's return to the gameplay. So to begin, it uses the Shin Megami Tensei press turn system in contrast to the Persona turn-based system. The main difference is that Shin Megami Tensei uses an action economy, where you get a certain number of turns, and you start with a number of turns. With those turns, you can take actions. Uh, if you strike a weakness, land a critical hit, or several certain miscellaneous actions, such as passing your turn, changing formation sometimes, will allow you to take bonus actions, but there's a limit to it based off of your initial starting actions. You can't go much further than where you started. In contrast, the Persona system is similar in the sense that you have actions per party member, and you can get extra actions by landing crits and on weakness. The difference with Persona is that you can get bonus actions by landing a critical attack or landing a weakness on a target basis. So you can just like hit a target, hit a different target, hit a different target, and on repeat. In Shin Megami Tensei, that doesn't fly. Frankly, I think press turn is a better system in general. So I don't think this is a bad thing. And honestly, I'd say that ReFantazio makes a better use of the press turn system than Shin Megami Tensei does. For those who are not familiar with Shin Megami Tensei, it's sort of a creature battler. Like I want to say Pokemon, but it's very not. That is not the mental image you should have. But basically, you go around, you collect monsters. Most of the monsters are based off of mythological figures. So you can go around with your Zeus, and he'll be able to do lightning damage and cause and hit lightning weaknesses. But in Metaphor, you can basically all of your characters are customizable. They use a fairly standard JRPG class system, which is very good. It is probably one of the best parts of the game. I think it's the most distinct part of Metaphor versus Shin Megami Tensei or Persona. The fact of the matter is that you can customize all of your party members to do whatever you want them to do, to a certain degree, like 99%. There is a caveat there, but the caveat's a spoiler, and I'm not going to go into it. But in short, you use the press turn system, or probably one of my favorite JRPG combat systems, and you combine it with a more traditional class-based system. The class system is honestly far deeper than you would think. You have a great number of classes to work with. Each class has its base skills. You have promotions, but the lower level classes have things that can make them relevant even into late game. The big things are that you have combo moves that are only usable if you have certain class combinations. For example, if you are the spellcaster class, you cannot do big hit all target type damage combo moves without having another caster class in your group, which leads to you want to form a party based around that sort of thing. And I think that adds a certain level of depth. There's also other things like there are skills that get stronger if you have more of the same class that can be transferred to other classes. So it's like, for example, the warrior has the For everyone in your group who has the same class, you do more physical damage. And you can move that skill to the monk class, and then you can have 4 monks, and it would work. And it doesn't just get stronger based off the number of fighters. It's actually just the same class. So you have 4 monks, you get a fairly sizable boost. It leads to interesting decisions to be made with building your formation. And part of the reason why I played the game on New Game Plus, despite it not having too much new content, was specifically to experiment more with the class system, because it was fun to play with. Like, it was a generally fun system, a system good enough to just not need me to, or not have a carrot for me to play with it. It was just good enough to play with as is. Though I gotta say, one side benefit of it is that I ended up getting a lot of goofy footage of special class combinations just styling on bosses in certain ways. And I'll be uploading those separately. Basically, every one of those videos is inherently spoilery, partly due to late game classes, partly due to just late game party members and all that stuff. But I'll be uploading those after this video if you're interested. Aside from the turn-based, you also have the ARPG style mode. I wouldn't say that it is strong enough to stand alone as an ARPG, but it is a nice minigame. I don't really want to call it a minigame because it's part of the actual game. But in short, when you're in the open world, you don't have random encounters. The enemies are on the open world. You interact with them. If they attack you, they get advantage on in combat, which is a big part of the game's difficulty. One thing I really like about this game is that I played it on the hardest modes I could, and the difficulty was less in everything's an HP sponge. When you put it on hard, suddenly everything takes 5 turns to kill and it's awful. No, difficulty in this game is you attack first and they die, or they attack first and you game over. It's pretty clear cut and savage, and I love that compared to HP sponge gameplay, which I think is not great. But open world stuff is pretty nice. Every class has its own combat style. Like, every class has its own weapon type. By using that weapon, it changes how you interact in the open world, and there's certain benefits. Just going to cover basic class stuff, like your starter class has a chance to do to have combo moves, where when you attack a monster, your party members might also attack the monster at random. I don't think it's entirely great, but it's cool. Fighter can't be forced into combat, which is very nice. It also hits really hard because you use a 2-hand sword. It's but you can also just game over by being when you get hit in the open world and you don't get forced into combat, you just lose health, and if your health goes to 0, that's also a game over. So it's worth considering. Then you have things like the mage. The mage has a pretty awkward weapon attack, but every time you get advantage or kill something outright, because if the targets are basically chaff fodder, I think it's 3 levels below what your current level, you can just outright kill them in the open world, and that's also a huge benefit, because otherwise the game would get very spammy very fast. It still can be, because that's just one of the things that happens in JRPGs. But being able to not have spammy, pointless battles with every creature you see is actually kind of nice. It also incentivizes leveling up a bit. It makes leveling up feel good. It could also lead, like, you could use it to grind. You could use it to some people say it makes the game too easy. I would argue that the game is, when it comes to the difficulty and stuff, build type is a whole lot more important than level. Level is not a huge factor as in terms of your character's power. not nearly as much as just the gear you have equipped and the skills and classes that you are currently set to make a far bigger difference. But also, tangent aside, mage class has a pretty annoying ability to attack, but every time you get advantage or kill something in the open world, you get mana, and that's pretty nice. There's a similar thing with the fairly early gained merchant class, where whenever you beat something, money comes out, which is kind of I love that sort of thing. It's funny. And uh, as for the part that probably has everyone comparing this game to Persona, you have the time management simulator stuff, where this game is very, very clearly similar to Persona. The game's cadence goes as you have mandated story segments where everything's pretty much railroaded. You have dialogue. You usually have three choices. Most of the time, the choices don't really matter, but it's dialogue. It gives some ambiance. It allows you to sort of choose your character's personality. It allows you to play the role, even if the destination is basically the same. It's nice, and I will say that it's not like it always doesn't matter. There are a few game over choices where if you're not paying attention and you pick the wrong choices, the game will just be like, "Oh, you have chosen death," and you have, and it's game over. But after the railroad sections are completed, you are left to open world section with a time frame. Usually, I want to say 10 to 30 days, where you have a day-night cycle where you can do one time-based action per cycle, or go into a dungeon and use both. There's also a travel cycle where you get on your vehicle and you go places, usually dungeons, and complete quests and fight things and grind. But this part is very much the bread and butter of the Persona series, and but despite that, it has its improvements. I think the biggest one is the social link equivalent. Supporters, I believe it's called. Unlike Persona, with your followers do not have a hidden favorability meter, where in Persona, your social links have. Where in Persona, your social links have a hidden variable that has how favorable you are, and you have to reach a certain point to get to the next part of their chapter. In ReFantasio, if you have access to that chapter, you talk to them, you get the chapter. There's no days spent just hanging out and waiting for the next chapter to be ready. You just go, you have your story bit, and it's good. And I think that is a very solid quality of life improvement, and it is a straight up improvement over the Persona style. The social links are also. We're going to be going into story next, which goes into a big part of my bias toward this game. If someone had told me they were going to make a Persona game, but it's not set in a high school, that game's basically already got one sale from me, because that is a huge win. Not that I dislike the high school setting, but it's having something that isn't that is nice, and to a certain degree preferable as far as I'm concerned. And ReFantasio definitely capitalizes on it. The game is a whole lot edgier than Persona in terms of just being an NPC in this game is a terrifying prospect. There are so many dead NPCs in this game, and there are so many bad things that happen to non-player characters. And I'd say that a good chunk of the party has a significant tragic backstory in comparison to Persona. It's not nearly as edgy as Shin Megami Tensei, though. If you're not familiar, those are the games where you Usually the setting is the world has ended, it's an apocalypse, and you're going to be punching God in the face at the end of the game. Basically every Shin Megami Tensei game, some variation. Sometimes you are not punching the Abrahamic God. Sometimes you're replacing him. Sometimes sometimes you're punching Lucifer instead. It's just that's how those games go. But in terms of tone, Fantasio is definitely a solid middle ground, and you get to see settings that you would not see in a Persona game. I think one good example might be a spoiler, but I don't think it's a huge one. This game features that's fantasy JRPG staple, which is a Colosseum. You have a Colosseum event. You fight monsters. You get big fancy one-time unique rewards that are very, very worth it. And you get to fight special boss fights with caveats like you can only fight by yourself, or you have to fight with this class, or it's a very enjoyable addition, and it's mostly flavor. It's not a huge part of the game. It is a straight up mini game, but it's not the kind of mini game that you'd see in Persona. Because how is a Japanese high school student going to fight in the Colosseum? Though if Persona 6 had a mini game of the same type, I'll eat my words and say it's a good thing, if it's a good thing. There's always a caveat that they implement it badly, but it is what it is. But I digress. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that the social links go in interesting places in comparison to the modern settings that we would be used to from Persona. To a degree, Shin Megami Tensei, but Shin Megami Tensei is not really a story game to begin with, usually. But despite that, I would also say that slightly to the detriment, some of the social links are a little bit gamey, where they suffer from the format of it, where you have a story, you have a obvious this is what happens next, but instead of this is what happens next, you have and we'll see you next time. Make sure to drink your Ovaltine. We'll see you next week. Make sure to come back for the next episode of this character and see how they deal with this cliffhanger type stuff. And I feel like that's a bit unfortunate for the stories. It's sort of... I think the words to use would be immersion breaking. In general, I think most of the stories are of reasonable quality. There are a few of them that were actually legitimately interesting. But I do remember thinking at least 2 or 3 times that this story could have just continued instead of having to wait for the next chapter. Since I'm starting to ramble and that puts things in danger of spoilers, I'm gonna move on. I'm not really a professional eye for visuals and graphics. I'm a this is good enough type person, but I was pretty impressed by how distinct this game is from. It is very easy to compare this game to Persona, but this game is very visually different in a lot of ways, despite the menu being basically ported from Persona 5. The actual the monster design, the enemies are very different. You have a lot of fantasy staples. You fight goblins, you fight dragons, you fight a whole lot of people. You beat a libertarian and make him pay his taxes. It's a pretty good time, all things considered. But you also have, I think the most distinctive thing is the monsters that are called humans in this game. That's a spoiler, but it's a spoiler that happens in the first hour, so whatever. The humans in this game are very visually interesting, and it seems that they were inspired by the works of Renaissance artist Hieronymus Bosch, which is something that I heard and can't do too much confirmation on, as I'm not an art critic, but I think that sort of thing is cool as hell. And it leads to some very interesting monster designs, I must say. And also fight designs too, because they made some really weird looking enemies, and they also just leveraged gameplay mechanics for them, which I think is a fantastic use of creativity, and it adds to the experience greatly. I like seeing this sort of thing, and in general would like to see more stuff like that in gaming. It's just one of those aspects that enriches the experience of playing games. Like if you play a lot of JRPGs, you know what Excalibur is, or Gungnir, or you end up knowing what a trident is. It's just one of those things where using real world inspirations just adds to the experience, in my opinion, and I love seeing that sort of thing. And I once going to repeat that I am not a great person to ask about things for sound. I like the soundtrack, and once again, they also had an interesting story for that one too. I didn't quite pick up on it until the very end of the game, because this is a tangent, but this game has a pretty convenient system where if you tab out of the game, which I tend to do, the game will just auto pause. And for the most part, I took advantage of this quite a bit. It meant that if I was in the open world, I didn't have to open a menu I could just tab and leave the room or whatever, and it's all good. But one exception to this is the credits. So the credits are rolling, you want to tab out, and nope. And that's when I rue not having a double monitor, but whatever. So I could have just left the room, but I ended up watching the credits. And midway through, I saw that midway through the sound section, they just credited this random temple. And something clicked, because in most of the songs in this game, there is a chanting like singing for quite a few songs. I was like, wait a second. So they credited this temple high priest, and he's probably the one doing all that chanting. And it turns out he was. That's so freaking cool. They just had this temple, apparently the Mio Joji temple, and the one credit to it is the chanter. Apparently they just found him through his band and contracted him for this because it fits. And I think that's the coolest thing. That being said, though, there are some weirdnesses with localization. I'm the type who always use Japanese subs for these sorts of games. It's just a bias of mine. It's nothing against English voice actors, but I am conditioned to have my immersion break when I hear my own language in these games. Except for it is what it is. It's just part of the JRPG experience for me. Actually, I was thinking about complaining about this, but I think I'll actually just show a clip to explain what I mean.
Seeker! Magic Seeker! Magician! Wizard! Fighter! Sword Master! Samurai! Knight! Magic Knight! Monk!
But you see what I mean? Like, for whatever reason, they just... This isn't all the classes. But... And they got a lot of classes right, but for whatever reason, you have the character actually saying a class name, and it's localized, and it's a completely different name. Why would you localize out monk or dealer? Why? Why is Swordmaster apparently just fighter? Why? It's so weird. But that about sums up the basics. I'm going to be covering a lot of these topics more extensively in future videos. Those videos will not be spoiler free. In fact, they will be spoiler ridden. But I hope this has helped you make an informed decision on whether you would want to play this game, whether you will play this game, or what have you. That's the whole point of it. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you.